We saw Bryce Young in mop-up duty in Sunday's loss against the Bears, and if things continue to trend in the wrong direction for the Panthers, we'll get to see Bryce Young start later on this season. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesdays throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'm right here answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council to ask your question for this week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And let's go ahead and get into it today, as the Panthers are coming off of a startling 36-10 loss against the Bears. I thought after the Panthers made the change to Andy Dalton that everything was going to be all right. At least that's what I was told. But I warned y'all that, yes, while the offense will finally be functional, and it really wasn't. The Panthers offense was just as bad on Sunday as it had been throughout the first 2 weeks of Bryce Young as a starter. But we can't sit here and argue that the offense isn't better, because it certainly is much better than what we saw. But the defense is clearly an issue and was always going to be an issue, whether Bryce Young or Andy Dalton was the starter. Now with Bryce, he was not moving the ball down the field. The defense was not going to get a break, and eventually they would wear down. But week one against the Saints, they got 9 straight scoring drives. So did they wear down in the second half, or had they already worn down in the first half? And in the Chargers, same case. Did they wear down in the second half, or were they already getting gas on the ground in the first half? Like, you could not explain away the way the Panthers defense played those first 2 weeks just because they came out with new energy in that third game of the season, where, yes, clearly the defense and the offense and the entire roster believed that Andy Dalton was the guy that gave him the best chance to win the quarterback position and not Bryce Young. But the one thing that was still true to that day, and was true before then, is that this defense stinks. And it does not matter whether Andy Dalton is a quarterback or Bryce Young is a quarterback. This defense is not good. And based off of the 165 points that they've given up, a franchise record, mind you, in the first 5 games, it's hard to see things getting better, especially now that Shaq Thompson's out for the rest of the season, Derek Brown's out for the rest of the season, and the injuries continue to pile up with guys who are still out there right now trying to hang around, and guys who haven't even played a single snap so far this season. But this conversation I want to have is not necessarily about the defense, but it's about Bryce Young and what we saw on Sunday as he made a cameo. And I did not expect to see Bryce Young again out on the field. I suppose it was always a possibility, considering the Panthers were only one play away from Bryce having to play, as they did not bring anyone in to be the backup to completely in the Bryce Young era in Carolina. And they decided on Sunday, they being Dave Canales, the same man who made a decision to bench Bryce Young, that it was time to see what Bryce could do. But based off his commentary on Sunday, it didn't lead you to believe that this was about development, or it was about how Bryce has handled the situation the last couple of weeks and giving him another opportunity to eventually be the guy. It was just to save Andy Dalton. And this is what Dave Canales said, quote, "We had a couple of injuries on the offensive line and wanting to get him in there, get some live reps, and he did a fantastic job playing with energy, extending plays, finding some completions down the field, which is all fantastic." It's a hard situation. At that point, it was just like, okay, with the different things happening on the offensive line, it was something where I wanted to get Andy out of there and just give Bryce an opportunity to continue some football in there while we had time. So he wanted to get Andy Dalton out because Taylor Moton hurt his tricep and was out for the rest of the game. And Austin Corbett tore his bicep and now is out for the rest of the season. So 2 of the 5 starters on the offensive line were gone. Why put Andy Dalton back there, who's truly the quarterback here in Carolina? and risk an injury to him with a banged up offensive line. Why not just go ahead and use Bryce Young as a sacrificial lamb? At least that's how it came across. And I saw a lot of fans on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, who were not pleased with that answer from Dave Canales. I suppose they wanted to hear that I really like the opportunity to get Bryce Young in there to see how he's developed and continue the development, because he's a player that we want to be our franchise quarterback, and this is a developmental organization and yada, yada, yada. Even though, go back 3 weeks ago, and Dave Canales never told us that the benching of Bryce Young was about development, that it was about one day going back to Bryce. It was that Andy gives him the best opportunity to win games right now. And that's all he wanted to answer. And since then, he's been giving us a bunch of non-answers. And it's completely different Dave Canales that we had seen dating back to when he first got Carolina back in January. We've been getting a bunch of word salad answers that mean absolutely nothing. And he did come back, though, on Monday, and he was asked about it. And again, I'll say this, too, like for the fans that were not happy, I thought you guys hated Bryce Young. I remember seeing a post on social media from the Roaring Riot saying that they use the Scooby-Doo meme, that, oh, we're just trying to find who the villain is. And here it is. It's Bryce Young. He's the reason we're losing. And sorry, not sorry, we like touchdowns. Like, that is what the official fan club is putting out there. And I mean, I love Josh Klein. I love people over there. I was kind of caught off guard by that sentiment being put out there by the official fan club, but it is what it is. So I was just kind of confused when I saw people on Sunday were upset with Dave Canales' answer. I thought you guys thought Bryce sucked and that you liked touchdowns and you didn't want to see him here anymore. But apparently that's not the case. Now, Dave Canales was asked by Mike Kay on Monday at his press conference following the loss to Chicago about what happened with Bryce and giving him an opportunity to clarify what he said. At least that's how Mike presented it. And this is what Dave Canales had to say, saying, quote, really the logic was this. The game was out of hand. This is an opportunity to get Bryce in there and let him play some football. We had some time on the clock, and the cool part was we manufactured a pretty good drive out of that, and we were able to get some valuable reps. And he goes on and mentions that going into games, they think about where the situation is going to be at the end of the game and whatever, and they want to be able to have some guys who they think about they can get some reps to at the end of the game, depending on the situation. And he included Jalen Coker in that conversation with Bryce Young. So understand this. Dave Canales said it was great to get the opportunity for Bryce Young to be able to play some football, and it was awesome that they moved the ball down the field. And in that same conversation, a question that was formed asking about Bryce Young, he mentioned Jalen Coker, the undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross. So that tells you everything you need to know, man. Canales does not see Bryce Young as his quarterback, which kind of begs the question, why take this job in the first place? If he did not believe that Bryce Young was your guy, maybe it was when he got here, he realized, oh, wow, this is not a salvageable situation, and I've got to bench him before I get my ass canned in 10 games or 11 games like Frank Reich did last year. And also just for the benefit of the entire locker room, which clearly everyone is a fan of Bryce Young getting benched based off the way they played against the Raiders and all that energy that we saw. And it felt a lot like a couple of years ago in Arizona when Cam Newton announced himself as being back, and there was renewed energy within that locker room. But going off of what he said on Sunday to where it's like, no, this was about protecting Andy behind a banged up offensive line, not necessarily about development, to which he's never said the benching was about for Bryce Young, even when given multiple opportunities to do so. And then coming back on Monday and saying, well, the logic is that we like to get guys an opportunity to play late in games based off of how things are going. And Bryce Young was one of those guys. And so is Jalen Coker, an undrafted free agent wide receiver at a Holy Cross, and not a guy that this organization gave up a ton of picks for, which we were constantly reminded of during that broadcast. And really, every single day of the week now when they play the Bears and all that they've benefited from up in Chicago, from the Panthers deciding to move up to get Bryce and really looking like they took the wrong quarterback. So, yeah, that's basically what I heard from Dave Canales on Sunday and on Monday, and tells me that he doesn't seem to be that interested in Bryce Young ever being their quarterback again. But here's the reality of the situation. This team is 1-4. And if things go their way, where I'm recording this before the Monday night game, if somehow, I think now the Saints lose on Monday night to the Chiefs, they go and play Tampa Bay next week. If they beat Tampa Bay, both those teams are 3-3. If the Panthers somehow are able to stop the Falcons defensively and put up enough points on offense and win, then the Panthers are 2-4. The Falcons are 3-3. They're only one game out of first place. So as long as they're reasonably within the division hunt, Andy Dalton has to be the quarterback. And yes, I was someone who said that it's over for Bryce Young in Carolina, and I still feel like it's going to be over for Bryce Young, but there has to always be the caveat, which I didn't put out there, but the caveat of if things continue to trend in a direction where they're trending, where the Panthers cannot stop a nosebleed, and that they're giving up 87% of touchdowns when opponents get to the red zone, which, yes, is worse in the NFL, and they're giving up 165 points through 5 weeks. And the only time the offense can win is when they score 36 points. And in the last 2 weeks, they've scored 34 points combined. Hard to think that this team is going to be able to turn things around. I'm going to hold out hope because, again, all you need is a New Orleans loss, a New Orleans win against Tampa, and a win against Atlanta. And through 6 weeks, you're only one game out of first place. But we see where this is going, and that the good vibes of a couple weeks ago seem to be dissipating at the same rapid pace all the good vibes dissipate at here over the last 5 years in Carolina. If this team is not anywhere close to being within the wild card race or the playoff race, and think about this too, y'all, like San Francisco's 2-3. You're only a game behind San Francisco, but we're not going to fool ourselves and believe the Panthers have the same chance to bounce back as the 49ers do once they get their guys back. And just the fact that, I mean, that's an uber talented team that's off to a rough start. If things are sideways in December, you've probably seen enough Andy Dalton to make a call there, whether you want him to be your guy the next year or not. It would feel fairly foolish if the Panthers didn't at least make sure that Bryce Young isn't the guy at all for them moving forward. I think they've already made that decision, and based off of history of what happens when these quarterbacks draft in the first round, get benched by the teams that drafted them, and they get traded, that it's probably over for Bryce Young. But this team's going to keep losing games, which is going to happen, but they're not going to win enough games to stay in the hunt in December. And of course, late in January, early in January, why not give him another opportunity and see? I guess the why not is, well, Dave Canales only wants to play Bryce Young because the offensive line's banged up. He wants to protect Andy Dalton, and he sees Bryce Young in the same light he sees guys like Jalen Coker, who went undrafted at an FCS school and did not win the Heisman Trophy or have a bundle of draft picks traded up for to get them as their franchise. So that's where things are. Now, Dave Canales did update us on Monday as far as the injuries. Austin Corbett is out, so yet another Monday, yet another season-ending injury announcement, and also went over a couple of other things of note from the game on Sunday. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your favorite bets. And looking over at FanDuel right now on Sunday, the Panthers return home to face off the division rival Atlanta Falcons. Currently, the Panthers are 6.5-point underdogs. They're plus 225 money line, and the over-under is set at 47.5. So go ahead, put your money on Carolina if you want. And I do understand last week I told y'all to do an alt line as, hey, hand up. Got that one wrong as far as him winning by double digits. I felt good about it. And, well, did feel great about it afterwards, but that's what it is. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hilldale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses. Here are a few of the courses available right now. Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution. Introduction to Free Market Economics. The Great American Story, A Land of Hope. The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Critical variables. That's what Dave Canales first pointed to when looking at the Carolina Panthers loss on film. The Panthers, like in week one, lost in all the critical variables. Looking at the 3 turnovers that they had on Sunday, the 2 fumbles, one of them where Tommy Trimble just gets absolutely lit up by Jaquan Brisker. I'm still wondering later on this week, will there be a fine? Because that did to me, I thought, looked a little helmet to helmet, maybe the shoulder to the head. Either way, like that's a tough hit to see. We'll see whether that results in anything, but that's a tough fumble. And if you get knocked out cold, like Tommy Trimble appeared to be for a second there, then yeah, you're probably going to fumble the football. Chuba Hubbard had another one later on where took enough steps, made a little football move, and had that ball knocked out. Then the interception where Jonathan Mingo, showing yet again, has no idea what he's doing as a wide receiver in the NFL, not able to locate the football. Kevin Byard does. The only real deep shot we had seen all game long at that point in time is picked off by the Bears safety, who had a better understanding of what was happening than the receiver who was running the route and knew the ball was likely going to come to him. And that resulted in 17 points off turnovers, plus the turnover on downs right before the end of the first half. And that led to another touchdown. And those things you just can't win the games if you turn the ball over and you have all those points off of turnovers and you're not able to convert any of the 4th downs that you try to go for, especially in those desperate situations like they had right before the half. They were 0 for 7 on 3rd and manageable. We've been over this before. The Panthers' first 2 weeks were just god-awful on 3rd down. Then when Andy Dalton came, they were in a lot of 3rd manageables and even some of the longer 3rd downs, and that's something that Dave Canales brought up too. Like they were able to convert. But on Sunday, 3rd manageable, 0 for 7 in those situations, and that limits them getting to their menu on offense and getting to things that they really wanted to do the previous 2 weeks, which they getting to do things that they did the previous 2 weeks where they had success. And I think that probably lends itself to running the football, where we saw Chuba Hubbard only get 13 carries. 6 of those came in the first half, 7 in the second half. And Chuba Hubbard has been outstanding the last 2 weeks. So, of course, you would love for him to get more than 13 carries, but when you're not able to convert on 3rd down and stay on the field, like in the first couple of weeks of the season, really hard to be dedicated to the run game, even though I still question just how dedicated this team truly is to the run game, as that was the only thing. And Robert Hunt said this in the locker room when speaking to the media. The only thing they did on Sunday that worked was the run game. And yet, here they are, still trying to pass the ball when blanketed all day long was Deontay Johnson. Whenever look at NFL Next Gen stats to see what the separation for receivers was, his average separation was 0 yards, y'all. 0 yards. So it's what I thought it was when I was watching the game. The Bears must be trying to take away everybody not named Deontay Johnson. As good as Xavier Legette may be for Carolina down the road, and as good as he was last year in the NFL, he's not done anything to warrant any sort of respect from anybody, especially Matt Eberflus, who's a really good defensive play caller. And until some of these guys step up, I thought they played well against Cincinnati. Aside from the drops that they've played well, but still, they're just not known commodities, and there's no reason for any good defense to really be that concerned about anybody on this offense in the passing game not named Deontay Johnson. And we kind of saw why on Sunday, because they took him away, and the passing game was non-existent. They also allowed 10 explosives, and that's not going to help, despite the fact that the Panthers defense held Chicago to 4 of 11 on 3rd down. That's a really good number, but you gave up 10 explosive plays. Chicago didn't really need to convert that many 3rd downs because they were getting chunk plays, and a couple of those chunk plays, the 2 touchdown passes to DJ Moore, of course, those resulted in touchdowns. There's a screen pass as well that results into a touchdown, and yeah, it was tough to watch. And the Panthers were 0 for 2 in the red zone, while the Bears were 3 for 4. Dave saying, quote, "In every single critical area that leads to success on Sunday, we got beat." Quote, "It all starts with effort, and I love the effort that we got. The film shows a team that's playing really hard. It's about execution. It's about owning our concepts. They're playing hard. They're just not executing or owning their concepts, according to their head coach. Austin Corbett, we found out officially from Dave Canales on Monday, will miss the rest of the season with torn biceps, and that's the same injury that Brady Christensen suffered last year as he hurt his biceps in the first game of the season on the road against Atlanta, putting the Panthers in a horrible situation as they already did not have Corbett to start off the year, as he was up on PUP with the torn ACL suffered week 18 the season prior. Same game where Brady Christensen was injured. Those two guys really bonded after having those injuries to end that 2022 season and having to rehab there in Carolina. And it was tough for Brady Christensen when he was asked about this. I believe it was on Sunday, just he was emotional. Obviously something he dealt with a year ago, and now see Austin Corbett deal with that. And it's tough, man. Like the Panthers, since Ryan Khalil, have been trying to find a center They went and got Matt Paradis in free agency from Denver. He was coming off of a leg injury. He didn't play well that first year, then came back the next year. After having a fully healthy offseason, I thought he played well. Then he has a torn ACL the next season. He's not able to play. Pat Elflein comes in, and he's better at center than he was at guard, but still, he was not that great for them in 2022. Starts off, he gets hurt because Bradley Bozeman, remember there's competition, he hurt his ankle during training camp of that year. And I think that had he been healthy, probably would have been the starting center the whole season. He ends up taking over after Pat Elflein hurts his hip, and he has not played football since. And now Austin Corbett is out. So that's 3 years now since Ryan Khalil left. The Carolina Panthers have gone out there and lost their starting center for the rest of the season. Hate to see it, but this is an opportunity now. And I believe for now, Brady Christensen would be the guy. And Dave Canales was asked as much on Monday if they would go with the same offensive line that they went with at the end of the game when they saw Taylor Moton go out and saw Austin Corbett go out. And he said, yes, right now that would be the plan, but they're going to continue to evaluate the center position. Damian Lewis has played center at certain points in times. Of course, Brady Christensen came in yesterday and has been the backup in large parts of the offseason, but also Andrew Raym, the undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma. He has also played center, and he was in concussion protocol on Sunday, still is as of this recording. If he's available, he may get an opportunity. Canales said that he could have been an option had he been available. And personally, I would love to see that. I was a pretty big advocate back in the offseason about the Panthers finally drafting a center like a Jackson Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier. Those guys would make sense to me just based off of what the Panthers' needs are and the fact they hadn't drafted one since they drafted Ryan Khalil all the way back in, I believe it was like 2007. It's been a long time, and they keep going out and getting free agents to varying successes. Paradis really wasn't one. Elflein, of course, wasn't. Bozeman was, and then he wasn't after all the injuries last year. And then, Corbett moved over to center, and I thought he was playing pretty good football. And now he's out for the rest of the season, and his out of contract too here in Carolina. He's an undrafted free agent, he's an unrestricted free agent after this year. He does have a $7.7 million cap hit in 2025 and a $3.8 million cap hit in 2026. So thank you to Scott Bitterer and Samir Suleiman for that. They restructured his deal in 2023, and that was right after he had already torn his ACL. So he tore his ACL earlier, and like really earlier in that year of 2023, but it was the 2022 season, tore his ACL in week 18. Then like a month and a half later, they restructured his deal. And at the time, it was a curious decision that they would do that to a player who's likely not going to be much of an impact for them the following season. And we saw it played out where Corbett didn't play for the first 6 games. Then when he came back, was not his same self, and then hurt that same knee, a meniscus this time after 4 games out for the rest of the season, and only lasted 5 games this year. And now the Panthers got to deal with just over $10 million in cap space that he's going to be hitting them on for dead cap the next 2 seasons when he likely will not be here. So that's tough to see. Maybe they bring him back, but I would really like to see Andrew Raym and start focusing on developing a young guy who can possibly be the answer at center long-term. But in reality, maybe need to go look and find somebody else, because Christensen also is a free agent after this year. The Panthers got to figure out what their center is going to be down the road. Taylor Moton, he's got a tricep injury, and it's going to be listed as week to week. He will miss out against Atlanta, which will end his Ironman streak of 120 games and 104 starts dating all the way back to the 2018 season. Hate to see it. It's like this something that was brought up a ton, and you knew eventually, like, it's just going to be jinx, but it's just football. It's a brutal game, and for him to have that injury, it's not a tear, which is a good thing. If it had been a tear, I'm guessing that probably would have cost him the rest of his season, and that would have been brutal to see. But the Panthers do have Josh Nijman, who has started and has been their swing tackle. That's what he was brought here to do, and getting paid pretty handsomely to be that backup tackle. He came in at right tackle, and he'll be a guy that will start moving forward. And here's the thing, too, guys. Like, we talk about it throughout the offseason. I felt like this offensive line was in a spot where they could handle injuries. If they lost someone for a couple of games, or God forbid that a season-ending injury, that they would be okay because Christensen has started at guard before, and he can now step in at center. That they have Josh Nijman, who has started at tackle and has had enough success to be able to be prioritized by the Panthers to be their swing tackle, and they even have Chandler Zavala. Now, it's not ideal that they're sitting here without Austin Corbett for the rest of the season and that they're going to miss Taylor Moton this week, but they're in a much better situation depth-wise than they were a year ago. They got 8 guys they can go to. Zavala actually played really well the 2 times he had to play so far this season against the Raiders when Damian Lewis went out in that game, and then the week after that when he started at home against Cincinnati. 8 guys you can depend on. Now you're down to 6. and really go back to 7 once Moton comes back. So much better spot than they were last year, but not something that you wanted to dip into in early October. Updates too on Dane Jackson, Ian Thomas, Jonathan Brooks, and DJ Woonham. Dave Canales called it a crucial week for Dane Jackson and Ian Thomas to show good movement skills and confidence making those football moves, things that you can't really simulate in practice. You got to, well, at least typically you don't, but the ramp up period, you got to really try to get them ready to go, see they're ready to go. So hopefully, especially with Tommy Trimble and concussion protocol, that they can get Ian Thomas back this week, as JT Sanders has had his struggles to start off his rookie season in Carolina. And then he said that DJ Woonham and Jonathan Brooks are, quote, really close. What does that mean? I don't know, because we heard that again last week, and this now pushes that timeline back because they're not going to open the window this week for them. Then hard to see either one of them playing until, I guess, Munich at the earliest, but really probably not until Kansas City in week 12. We will see how that all plays out. But those are some updates from Panthers head coach Dave Canales on Monday afternoon, following the Panthers' 36-10 loss to Chicago. Keys victory. Do that on Friday, as long as it makes sense. And the way things are going may not make sense much longer, but we'll keep doing it anyways. That's its content, and I enjoy doing it with y'all. We'll review those Keys victory as, didn't really pan out, but it kind of did, though. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Football season is back, and the best way to get the games this fall is with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Guys, I was over in Columbia this past weekend watching the Gamecocks just get throttled by Ole Miss. A terrible game to watch, but I had to get a friend a ticket last minute, went over to Game Time, and it was so easy. Love the panoramic view feature, knowing exactly where you're going to sit before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. It's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. On Fridays throughout the regular season, as long as it makes sense, I provide my keys to victory, but it always makes sense because we always need to know what the 3 things the Panthers, at least 3 things. They need to do more than 3 things, but at least 3 key things the Panthers need to do in order to beat their opponent that weekend. And number 1 thing the Panthers need to do was have their 2 linebackers step up. Trevin Wallace, Claude, and Chairless both starting for the first time in their careers, as Shaq Thompson, unfortunately, is out for the rest of the season with an Achilles tear. Then Josie Jewell dealing with a groin and a hamstring injury missed last week. No updates on him on Monday from Dave Canales. Maybe we'll get an update later on this week, and certainly we will, as the injury report will come out on Wednesday, but he was not out there on Sunday. Did travel, did help those guys out on the sideline. Trevin Wallace, though, led the team with 15 tackles, 10 of them solo, had a 62.9 PFF grade. That was the 5th best on the defense. Claude Chairless, watching the game, didn't feel like he made that big of an impact. Only had 5 tackles, 1 of them solo, but had a 75.3 PFF grade and 3rd best on the defense. And those 2 combined, by the way, looking at PFF, only credited with 1 missed tackle. That was Trevin Wallace, who missed one of those tackles. Other than that, no missed tackles between the 2 as they made their first starts in their career. And that's really positive to see, especially the way that Wallace played, but also Claude Chairless is the guy that throughout training camp, he was someone that impressed his coaching staff. And he was brought in last year after roster cutdowns via the waiver wire to be a special teams ace that he had spent time with the Jets. And he came in and that was his role. And this year that's continued to be his role. But now he's got an opportunity to play. At least he graded out well, and I wonder if that's what Dave Canales and the defensive coaching staff, led by Ajero Vero, also saw. That's positive. Those 2 guys, I mean, the whole defense is a problem, but I guess they weren't the problem on Sunday in that loss to Chicago. Looking at the second key, find a way to pressure Caleb Williams. Bears had given up 16 sacks heading to that game. That was tied for 3rd most in the NFL. The Panthers, unfortunately, only had 1 sack, and that occurred on the opening drive by Charles Harris. After that, they did not get any sacks. And Caleb wasn't really under pressure that much. Caleb Williams entered the game under pressure on 32.7% of his dropbacks, where he only completed 38.9% of his passes for 135 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, had a 33.9 passer rating. Now, he was under pressure, only 17.1% of his dropbacks. Now 6 total dropbacks on Sunday, and he was 0 for 2 passing. Now he did scramble on 3 of those and got a first down. So the Panthers did get a little bit of pressure, but not really compared to what he had been, that the offensive line for Chicago had been allowing sack-wise and pressure-wise through the first 4 games of the season. Caleb Williams did not complete a pass under pressure, but also wasn't under pressure that much. And we saw he ran around and was vintage Caleb Williams and had by far the best start of his NFL career, his young NFL career, but followed up a good start against the Rams with a great start against the Panthers in that win on Sunday for Chicago. Then the final thing, Chuba Hubbard had to just keep having success on the ground, and he did. Open up the scoring with a 38-yard touchdown, and that was also just great blocking from the interior, from Damon Lewis, from Robert Hunt, and Austin Corbett. All 3 of those guys, they were fantastic, and that's why it just hurts so much, too, to see Austin Corbett out for the rest of the year, as those 3 just, road graders in the interior and just only lasted 5 games. Just hate to see that. But Chuba Hubbard had 13 carries for 97 yards, including, again, that 38-yard rush. And Dave Canales said that the run game was efficient, had 65% efficiency. That's what he said in his press conference. And currently looking at rushing success rate in the NFL, this is like league-wide, including quarterbacks and everybody who runs football. He is currently number 1 in the league and only 15th, though, in rushing attempts. So let's get those rushing attempts up, because Robert Hunt came out and said the one thing the Panthers did well was run the football, and, well, didn't run the football that much. Why? Because they were 0 for 7 on third and manageable and weren't able to get to the menu of plays they wanted to and do the things that they had done the last 2 weeks offensively against the Raiders and against the Bengals, because they did not have success on third down. Totally understand, but still, there were situations like we saw a couple weeks ago, like the Chargers game. Chuba Hubbard has a great run, first down of the game. Next play, it's throw over the middle by Bryce Young that gets intercepted. And we see in this game, you got back-to-back runs that leads to a first down, and then the Panthers tried to do a pass, and then there's a penalty. It's just like, why? Now you're behind the sticks when you were ahead of the chains, having successful runs from Chuba. Like, why decide to just take the ball out of his hands and put it in the quarterback's hands when the passing offense clearly, as we saw, was not working out on Sunday? I don't know. Panthers also are 21st in rushing attempts in the NFL. A lot of that's a product of just third down difficulties. In this game, in the first 2 games of the season, I still have not seen that stubbornness to run the football from Dave Canales. And I had somebody DMing about that, and I don't know, man. I haven't seen it. I understand his logic to why they haven't been able to do it as much as they would like, but still, it just does not feel like the want to that we were told about has been there when you have the most successful running back in the NFL so far based off a rushing success rate through 5 weeks into the season. It is what it is. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesday, that's tomorrow, I'll be back answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. And I get it, team's not playing well, and it's the annual time every year where people are fired up in August, September. Numbers for the pod are high, and in October, everything drops off because the team starts to stink, and you guys stop wanting to watch and listen. And I totally get it, because I kind of do the same thing when Carolina football Tar Heels go bad. So, but still, please hang in there with me. Send in the mailbag questions, because I like to answer your mailbag questions, and that's certainly helpful throughout the week to be able to try to break things up and have you guys interact with the show. So either at me or DM me on Twitter at Julian Council. I'm not going to beg you, but please send in questions, and I will answer them on Wednesday, or at least in your DMs if I'm not able to answer them on the show. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I will talk to y'all, of course, on Wednesday.